As the Soviet army advanced on Berlin, Adolf Hitler retreated to a private underground bunker deep in the Reich Chancellery at 77 Wilhelmstrasse. The Führer, who had just 6 days before assumed personal command of the defense of Berlin, was in a state of deep despair. It was clear to him that he had lost the war and only a matter of time before the Russians, the Americans, and the British would take control of Germany. He gathered the remaining members of his inner circle and announced to them that all was lost. He then returned to his private bunker and began writing what he called "My Last Political Testament." In it, Hitler looked ahead at what he believed was Germany's future. From the sacrifices of our soldiers and my own comradeship with them, there will come into German history the seed of a brilliant renaissance of the National Socialist movement. Throughout the document, one theme was dominant: hatred of the Jews. He blamed the war on them. It was desired and instigated by those international statesmen who were either of Jewish origin or working for Jewish interests. And he also made this chilling prediction: centuries may pass, but out of the ruins of our cities and monuments of art, there will arise anew the hatred for the people who alone are responsible: international Jewry and its helpers.
Wednesday, the 4th of May, 2005. 2200 hours till infinity. DJ Michel the Heidi. DJ Adolf Van Boren.
Auschwitz. Tanzen macht frei.
Seven million party people set their bodies on fire. Literally speaking. Haha. Dress code, dress as skinny Jew. 3 days of non-stop partying. And gangbanging. While spending the night for free. Hot showers, free of charge. Train stops at party ground. Free taxi ride home.
Ich hätte nichts gegen sie, wenn sie mein Volk nicht kaputt machen würden und die ganze Welt tyrannisieren und ausbeuten.
تجدون اليهود وراء كل فتنة على هذه الأرض. معاناة الشعوب وراءها اليهود.
If you affected all the Jewish communities, it is macabre. All the Jews are guarded by the police. It is 60 years after Auschwitz.
Aujourd'hui, la communauté juive en France ne se sent plus en sécurité et surtout n'a plus confiance en la France.
Beloved Muslim brothers and sisters, we believe, we understand. But the people that don't understand and get a one-sided story from the media that is run by the Jews.
The Jews have always been the canary in the mine, and almost every community has failed to get the signal right. They don't go after the violent anti-Semites when they just direct their attention at Jews. And then they come after the mainstream, like in Great Britain. And when that happens, they say to themselves, oh my God, why didn't we see the signal? It was there, it was obvious for all to see. And I think the reason for it is that deep down, anti-Semitism is still acceptable in the minds of many people. If you just limit yourself to the Jews, don't worry, we're not coming after you.
On the outskirts of Paris, one finds a series of suburbs that are a far cry from what most associate with the City of Lights. It is here where the majority of Paris's Muslim community lives. In recent years, mosques such as this one have been erected all over the country. From their pulpits, fundamentalist imams blame Jews and Zionists for the problems of their congregants and exhort French Muslims to take revenge. Islamic bookstores stock their shelves with anti-Jewish and anti-Zionist volumes, DVDs, cassette tapes, and videos. Outside the mosque, there is little question about the effects of these activities.
When I was growing up, I heard the Jews are this, the Jews are that. I've hated them. I didn't know them, but I've hated them.
Jihad. Qu'est-ce que c'est? Ça? Qu'est-ce que c'est? Ça, c'est la famille, ça. C'est le gang. C'est le gang? C'est le gang, oui. And you said jihad? C'est le jihad, oui. C'est pour la guerre bientôt, là.
Suicide bombers, suicide terrorism. Do you support that?
Yes, because they do things for us.
The National Commission of the Human Rights is doing every year a report of the human rights in France, and they pointed for the last 5 years that the racism that was growing, faster than all other racism in France was anti-Semitism. And now this year, 70% of the racist acts in France are anti-Semitic, coming now more from a population of the suburbs.
There is a fatwa, a religious ruling that says it is okay that we must kill Jewish embryos in the bellies of their mothers because later they will be Israeli soldiers. And those fatwas are spread in Europe, spread by certain fundamentalist imams. The youngster who goes to mosque on Fridays, when he hears this, wherever he might be, he wants to obey that ruling, which means that the danger is no longer in the Middle East, it is here.
I was in my synagogue preparing my sermon in the service, and a man knocked at the door, and everything came very quickly. He just shouted very loudly, Allahu Akbar, which means Allah is great in Arabic, but with a French accent, very strong French accent. And, well, it happened very quickly. I just received I was injured with a knife.
Et dans cette passerelle, 4 musulmans étaient scotchés là-bas.
There was an overpass, and on it were 4 Muslims. They began to throw beer cans at us. I told my wife, don't pay attention to them. My wife was pregnant. She was pregnant. One of the 4 came to us and said, "Dirty Jew, get out of here. This isn't your neighborhood. There is nothing for you to do here. Get lost." He began to slap me in the face. When he slapped me, my head hurt a lot. The 3 others jumped on me and started hitting me on my back, my legs. I fell to the ground and they kept beating me when I was down. Then they shoved my pregnant wife. They shoved my wife, and after they shoved her, they ran away. To this day, I am traumatized by this incident. I walk in the street and I'm scared, because everywhere we go, we cannot live in peace. We never bothered anyone. My wife is afraid. She is pregnant. She is scared.
In the early parts of the onslaught of anti-Semitic attacks against Jews in France, we had a meeting with President Chirac in the Élysée Palace, because in those times, the government pretended that anti-Semitism wasn't an issue at all. It was just a bunch of juvenile delinquents from poorer neighborhoods. But there was no anti-Semitism. So we came for our meeting with President Chirac, told him of our concerns about what was happening, attacks on synagogues, gravestones overturned with swastikas. And the president looked at us and told us this remarkable story. He said, "One day I was campaigning for the presidency, and I saw a young man. I extended my hand to him, and I asked him, have you studied the university in Paris?" And he said, "Yes, I've graduated University of Paris." So the president said to him, "Are you going to go to graduate school?" And he said, "No, I'm going home, Palestine." And Chirac said, "What are you going to do in Palestine?" He said, "I'm going to kill Jews." And then Chirac looked at us and he said, "Do you know why that young man wanted to kill Jews? It's because of the humiliation that he and people like him feel. They've been humiliated." And in response, I was shocked. I said to President Chirac, "No, it's not the humiliation, Mr. President. It's the fanaticism. Are they the only people in the world that were ever frustrated? Tens of millions of people in Africa and Europe, even in North America, because of poverty, because of ill health, go to bed every night frustrated, at wit's end as to what their future may be. Do they go out the next day and blow up buses and blow up trains? It's not humiliation. It's their allegiance to fanaticism, never to compromise. And it's that fanaticism that has come back to haunt Europe. It is that fanaticism that is present in France and now in London."
Let no one be in any doubt, the rules of the game are changing. But if you come to our country from abroad, don't meddle in extremism. Because if you meddle in it or get engaged in it, you're going to go back out again.
Some thugs broke in here, indiscriminately smashed windows, desecrated the place, sprayed paint, as you can see, over the front of the synagogue on the Holy Ark. I'm holding here a scroll which is actually the story of a heroine, a Jewish heroine who defeated forces of anti-Semitism, a story which has been going on for thousands of years, and unfortunately you can see here that this has also been desecrated with the paint that was sprayed all over the front of the building. I don't think that in living memory anybody can really recall anything like this happening to a synagogue in this country.
It's very alarming. The figures showed a total of more than 500 attacks or assaults or threats or desecrations in and around the UK, which is a substantial increase on the previous year. There were also 84 recorded assaults on members of the Jewish community, and they are primarily coming from within the Muslim community.
So how do you fight the Hindus? You have to bomb the Indian businesses. And as for the Jews, you kill them physically.
Imam Abdullah el-Faisal drew huge crowds of disaffected Muslims to his Brixton Mosque before his arrest by British authorities on charges of soliciting murder. Jermaine Lindsay, one of the 4 suicide bombers who attacked the London transportation system on July 7th, killing 52 and wounding close to 1,000, started attending el-Faisal's sermons at the age of 15. Richard Reed, the British-born terrorist apprehended trying to use a shoe bomb to blow up an American Airlines jet, came to el-Faisal's services on a regular basis. Zacharias Moussaoui, who many believe was the unsuccessful 20th hijacker in the attacks of 9/11, could often be found at el-Faisal's mosque. El-Faisal was also a close associate of Abu Qatada, arrested by British authorities after Prime Minister Blair announced his tough new anti-extremist measures. Considered by intelligence agencies to be Osama bin Laden's European ambassador, Abu Qatada had been directly linked to the Madrid train bombings in 2004 that left 191 dead. Authorities also believe that he was a mentor of Mohammed Atta, the lead hijacker in the attacks of 9/11.
What I do is according to the Muslim faith to proclaim Islam.
Abu Qatada and the July 7th suicide bombers were also closely associated with the Finsbury Park Mosque, until recently the spiritual base of Abu Hamza al-Masri.
So basically there is a lot of common between us and the Christians. My blame for them, don't say I'm a Christian and then you put all your resources in the hands of the Zionists, the enemies of Christianity and the enemies of mankind.
Now being held by British authorities on charges of soliciting the murder of non-believers, particularly Jews, Abu Hamza has had a tremendous influence on the Muslims of England.
Who's the Jewish? What they doing? Show me something nice they done for Muslims. Show me one thing. Nothing. Just killing children and killing people. 1,000 children, Muslim children, been dead by Jewish. No one child been, a Jewish child been dead by Muslims. Muslims can't recover. But the Jewish hate the Muslims. Everybody knows that.
Since his arrest by British authorities, the United States government has been attempting to extradite Abu Hamza for, among other things, trying to set up an al-Qaeda training camp in Oregon.
But I can understand the pressure from the Zionists and from America, which everybody hates and understands anyway. So there are 2 reasons. One,
Omar Bakri Muhammad, an aide to Abu Hamza, founded the Islamic fundamentalist organizations Al-Muhajirun and Hizb ut-Tahrir. He left Great Britain for Lebanon the day before British police were likely to arrest him for his extremist activities.
We have Sheikh Osama bin Laden on Amir, and they're recognized by every single person. So that is the victorious group. Al-Qaeda and all its own branches and organizations of the world, that is the victorious group. And you have Amir, and you're obliged to join.
Bakri made headlines after he organized annual conferences on September 11th to celebrate the bombings of the World Trade Center. His most recent conference hailed the suicide bombers as the Magnificent 19, and one of the professed goals was to recruit as many young Muslims as possible from England's 2 million member Islamic community to the cause.
It's about time for the whole West to realize Islam is the truth. As a matter of time, Islam got to be implemented. And the giant of Islam and the giant of the Islamic State is going to rise up again. And it's going to be a true fact in reality. Even in Europe, people calling La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah.
In the weeks following the attacks on London's transportation system, a website associated with Omar Bakri warned that the bombings are not the first and will not be the last. Interviewed by Reuters, Bakri discussed his desire to see Britain become an Islamic state. I would like to see the Islamic flag fly not only over 10 Downing Street, but over the whole world.
Would you condemn Osama bin Laden?
No way. Why I can't condemn Osama bin Laden for? I condemn Tony Blair. I condemn George Bush. But I will never condemn Osama bin Laden or any Muslims.
But he was behind the killing of several thousand people in the World Trade Center.
I don't believe so.
What I would say about those who do suicide operations or martyrdom operations, because suicide is a term coined in the media, they're completely praiseworthy. In fact, if I see Mujahideen attack the UK, I'm always standing with the Muslims.
I would never go to the police.
Why not?
Never ever go
You're
to
a British citizen?
Because I believe that to spy on Muslims is particularly not allowed at all.
Topic is self-sacrifice operation, suicide bombing, call it whatever you want to call it. فَيَقْتُلُونَ وَيُقْتَلُونَ, and they must kill and to be killed. You want to call us extremists? Yes, I'm extreme. Somebody, he fly aeroplane and he decide to land the aeroplane over the 10 Downing Street, for example, or over the White House. This is another self-sacrifice operation. What people call suicide operations, they mean somebody, he wear explosive or he carry explosive and he go and he blow it really in a building, in a house with the people. Martyrdom is what you want. Make sure you have nothing left behind you to think about or to cry for, and fight in the name of Allah.
Besides their Islamist views, what else do the extremists have in common? They all came to Great Britain and were granted political asylum after fleeing or being expelled from their home countries for their fundamentalist activities.
As Tom Friedman of the New York Times said, if you don't stop terrorism in the Middle East or hatred in the Middle East, it's coming to a theater near you. And it came, tragically, not to a theater in London, but to trains and buses in London. And it's going to come to many other parts of the world. And there are very, very serious problems about freedom of speech that every democratic society has to consider. But empirically, there is no doubt that there is an association between the kind of hatred preached by many imams in London and elsewhere and the manifestations of hatred that are reflected by the bombings. Because this is one area where hate speech definitely translates into hate action.
People do have rights, whatever they may have done, and we cannot throw them away and allow them to be subjected to torture or even death simply because we don't want them on our soil. We must find other solutions.
These proposals from Blair today have moved us a long way away from the broad consensus that we had after the 7th of July bombings, and they put that consensus under serious strain. We have grave concerns about some of the proposals that have been brought forward today.
If someone comes into your home and misbehaves, what do? Do you allow him to go and consult with a lawyer, a human rights lawyer, or any other kind of lawyer, because you're infringing his rights, because you are thinking of actually removing him from your house? You need very strong political will. And I'm not sure if the leadership in this country has, A, understood the threat and therefore may not have the political will to actually deal with it in the way that it needs to be dealt with.
The entire pressure of the media is about when Palestinians fight back. Very little coverage of many of the abuses of human rights or the slaughter that the Israeli occupying forces undertake quite regularly. If a young Jewish boy in this country goes and joins the Israeli army and ends up killing many Palestinians in operations and can come back, that's wholly legitimate. But for a young Muslim boy in this country who might think, I want to defend my Palestinian brothers and sisters, and goes and gets involved, he is branded as a terrorist.
Ken Livingstone is a classic anti-Semite. His statements from beginning to end fall clearly on the anti-Semitic side of the line. And he's a kind of intellectual thug. The interesting issue is why he's elected. The interesting issue is why he's so popular in London.
It's high time that everybody, including the Mayor of London, faced up to the facts. The root cause of the terrorism we face is a global ideology based on hatred, an ideology that has an infrastructure which results in carnage of civilians around the world. It is dangerous and it is wrong to try to distinguish between terrorism in the United Kingdom and terrorism in other countries, including Israel. It was British-born Muslims who went to Tel Aviv and blew up people on Tel Aviv beach in Mike's Bar.
You see a civilian die, a Jewish civilian, oh, the Jewish man died. It's a great honor to kill one of these people.
And it's the hatred that sent those young men to Israel that's the very same hatred that leads to similar people carrying out outrages in London. I think it is entirely unacceptable for people to feel that they can condemn what happened in the United Kingdom, yet support similar acts against civilians in other countries.
I was asked how young people in the street saw bin Laden. I told them they saw him as Robin Hood.
Jean-Francois Bestan is a Belgian convert to Islam and the founder of the Young Muslims Party, an Islamic political movement based in Brussels, Belgium.
C'est Robin des Bois, c'est-à-dire l'homme qui défend les pauvres et les opprimés.
It is Robin Hood, the man defending the poor and the oppressed against an unfair king. The king is America, Bush, Zionism. He is going to attack an unjust king, abstractly represented by the Twin Towers that are a symbol of the economy, of an arrogant and imperialist force of the American market in the world. In this respect, it is an act of poetry, an abstraction.
Bestan, whose political party has become increasingly popular among young Muslim immigrants in Brussels, does not believe anti-Semitism is a problem in the Islamic community.
Of course, anti-Semitism does not exist among Muslims. There is no anti-Semitism. I say that frankly, it does not exist.
While the political leader takes this position, his son, Mohammed El-Amin Bestan, has been detained in Turkey in connection with the bombings of 2 synagogues in Istanbul on a Sabbath morning in November 2003 that killed 23 and left several hundred injured. Dyab Abou Jahjah, founder of the Arab European League headquartered in Antwerp, Belgium, has an even bigger following than Jean-Francois Bestan. On various occasions, Abou Jahjah has described the attack on the World Trade Center on 9/11 as sweet revenge. He told a Dutch newspaper that he would have preferred to see empty planes crashing into the White House and the Pentagon. I would have found that quite beautiful, he said. Calling himself the Arabian Panther, Abou Jahjah's reach extends from Belgium into the Netherlands. He is idolized by many young Belgian and Dutch Muslims who often line up for hours to attend one of his lectures. Abou Jahjah's critics accuse him of inciting violence against Jews in both Belgium and the Netherlands. During one anti-Israel demonstration in Antwerp that he organized, Arab European League members and Moroccan youths burned a doll dressed as a Hasidic Jew in effigy, and then went on a rampage, destroying the storefronts of Jewish-owned businesses, screaming for a jihad, and chanting Osama bin Laden.
is recht voor zijn raap. Dat zeker. Hij is niet bang om bepaalde dingen te zeggen.
Het feit dat hij zeg maar trots predikt voor eigen identiteit en zo spreekt mij wel aan eigenlijk.
Een sterke visie, weet duidelijk hoe hij dat moet verwoorden en weet absoluut wat hij wil. En dat sprak me heel erg aan.
On his website, he will write things like, those rich Zionists of Antwerp have everything to say and they rule the government. So he incites to anti-Semitism.
Yet the Muslim leader believes that all of the accusations about anti-Semitic violence against Belgian Jews are exaggerated.
I mean, the incidents, for example, last year in this city were 6 incidents that people consider anti-Semitic. Well, if you go investigate what these incidents are, only 1 incident can be really considered as such, and the other 5 incidents are just fights between kids.
But the U.S. State Department says there have been far more than the 6 incidents in Belgium. Its report on global anti-Semitism shows there has been a 400% increase in the amount of anti-Semitic verbal or physical abuse in the country. Helping to spread the views of Dyab Abou Jahjah, Jean-François Baston, and other Islamic extremists are satellite broadcasts from the Middle East. These programs are beamed into millions of homes in Muslim neighborhoods throughout Europe.
فقد ابتلانا بأشد الناس عداوة للذين آمنوا اليهود لأن إسرائيل سرطان استشرى في جسد الأمة الإسلامية لأن اليهود فيروس يشبه الإيدز.
مهم القيادة بدنا دم طفل مسيحي قبل الفصح.
A television miniseries produced in Egypt that dramatized the infamous anti-Semitic tract, The Protocols of the Elders of Zion, was widely seen over European satellite networks aimed at Muslim audiences. In March of 2005, the European Union ordered broadcasters to stop carrying Al-Manar TV, the terrorist organization Hezbollah's television channel. But Al-Manar is only one of a number of satellite channels that contain blatant anti-Jewish propaganda and stereotypes. Even Al Jazeera, often called the CNN of the Arabic-speaking world, features guests who offer unfounded theories about Jews with no opposing points of view.
لا بد ألا نستبعد أي فرضيات. لا نستبعد فرضيات أن تكون مخابرات غربية أخرى لدول كارهة لبريطانيا. لا نستبعد دول معينة يعني بعض الناس الصهاينة الأمريكان بعض من يريدون أن يغطوا على القمة.
In addition, there are hundreds of websites that offer webcasts of this same kind of material.
جدا كل الناس بتتمنى الشهادة.
أيوه.
لأنه يعني إيش في أحلى من إنك تروحي على الجنة.
طب مين أفضل السلام مع وجود حقوق كاملة للشعب الفلسطيني ولا الشهادة؟
الشهادة. أنا أخذ حقي بعدين
استشهد. راضية بالكلام هذا؟
طبعا الشهادة أحلى لأنه إحنا هلا بناش الدنيا بدنا الآخرة.
أيوة.
إنه مش الدنيا اللي حتفيدنا الآخرة.
أيوة.
لكن أطفال فلسطين أخذوا فكرة إنه هذه شهادة إنه عندهم مثلا إنه موت شهادة وهذا إشي كتير كويس إنه مثلا كل طفل فلسطيني ولد مثلا قول له عمره 12 سنة يا رب استشهد.
في معنا إحنا اتصال هاتفي صابرين من رام الله.
يعني صح إحنا بنحزن الشباب لما يموتوا بنحزن الأطفال لما يصير هيك بس لازم بنفس الوقت نفرح لأنه الشهداء مصيرهم الجنة. آيات الأخرس لما فجرت يعني كان عمرها 17 سنة و17 سنة البنت بتكون واعية.
صابرين أنت مع أو ضد؟
أنا مع التفجير طبعا لأنه هذا حقنا.
You can't control the media. It's not possible to say to them, don't look at Al Jazeera or make contact by the internet with an imam in Saudi Arabia. It's not possible. And that's a big problem.
Rek Vlanderen is a teacher at a high school in Amsterdam, Holland. He says that anti-Jewish satellite programs and websites, many of which claim the Holocaust is a hoax, have had a negative influence on his Muslim students.
تحيطها كثير من الملابسات وهي باتفاق أيضا بين الحركة الصهيونية وهتلر لقتل اليهود الفقراء لكي يدفع اليهود الأغنياء وبقية اليهود الهجرة إلى فلسطین.
یکی از پرآوازه‌ترین فیلم‌های تاریخ سینما در مظلوم نمایی قوم یهود و در راستای اهداف رژیم صهیونیستی ساخته شد. فهرست شیندلر به کارگردانی استیون اسپیلبرگ. مانند اکثر افسانه‌های تاریخ سینما درباره قوم یهود نظیر بنهور، 10 فرمان، خاطرات آن فرانک، اکسودوس، شیرهای جوان، انتخاب صوفی، زندگی زیباست و پیانیست. این فیلم هم از مدت زمانی به درازی برباد رفته برخوردار است و در سال 1995 جمعیت یهودیان آمریکا موسوم به ایباک با صدور بیانیه‌ای از تمام کمپانی‌های بزرگ یهودی خواست تا اسپیلبرگ را برای خدمت به اهداف قوم یهود مورد حمایت مادی و معنوی قرار دهند. اسپیلبرگ به پشتوانه این حمایت‌ها در ردیف پردرآمدترین و ثروتمندترین ستارگان هالیوود قرار گرفت. با همکاری جوزف کتزنبرگ مدیرعامل کمپانی والت دیسنی و نیز دیوید گوفن مدیرعامل کمپانی گوفن با سرمایه هنگفتی کمپانی دریم ورکس را تأسیس نمود.
They deny it. They say, well, the Holocaust didn't take place. It's a Jewish conspiracy, and well, it never took place.
Or sometimes they're not denying it, but they are making congratulation on Hitler, for example. They say, well, Hitler did a great job. We should finish it, for example. And they say Hitler would have been a good Muslim, for example.
Some schools are choosing the strategy of not talking about the Holocaust when there have Muslims in the class.
They are afraid to teach about the Holocaust because they tell him, we know where your car is, we know your address, etc., etc. Because we don't like to hear about Jews, because Jews are evil and Jews are devils. And what we hear at home is the story. That's the right story. And what you're telling me is just like propaganda of the Zionist.
Unlike the rest of Europe, Islamic fundamentalism is not the major cause of increasing anti-Semitism in Germany. The problem is coming from a more traditional source, the neo-Nazi right.
The main concern lies in the so-called nationally liberated zones in parts of East Germany, where you have such a strong dominance of Nazis. So there's absolutely zero tolerance for anything that is not clearly, purely German.
Now it is the fact that at every weekend is a demonstration from us. At some weekends are 2, 3, 4 more demonstrations of us. That's a sign that we are growing.
In the last few years, the whole teaching and the whole storytelling has moved towards not talking about the perpetrators, but putting Germans in the scene as being the real victims.
A major promoter of this victim mentality is the National Democratic Party, or NPD. To many, the NPD is the modern-day incarnation of the Nazi Party. It has been accused of being anti-immigrant, anti-Israel, and pro-Hitler. At rallies, NPD speakers have stated that there is a Jewish conspiracy to take over the world. In recent municipal, state, and federal elections, the NPD has won increasing support from the German electorate. As world leaders and Holocaust survivors gathered to commemorate the 60th anniversary of the liberation of the Auschwitz death camp, lawmakers belonging to the NPD walked out of the state parliament of Saxony in protest during a ceremony honoring victims. Neo-Nazi singer Frank Rennecke, who wrote and is performing this song, is one of many neo-Nazi musicians closely associated with the NPD. Helmet, not his real name, is a young German reporter who has infiltrated the world of neo-Nazi music.
Die organisierte Neonazi-Szene.
The organized neo-Nazi scene recruits its new members through concerts like this, because functions like this attract people who would never attend a political event with speeches. But the music transfers the ideology, and the scene uses that consciously. There are weekends with 4 or 5 concerts in Germany, and some of them in bordering countries. And the big concerts, they always have more than 1,000 people. Bands play songs in which they call for stabbing Jews. The music is a breeding ground for violence. The scene is growing. The number of concerts is also increasing every year. And the danger is that the number of neo-Nazis is growing.
As neo-Nazi bands celebrate the murder of Jews and the attacks of 9/11, fellow neo-Nazis are turning their words into action.
Alors, le wagon se trouve là depuis à peu près 30 ans.
This train car has been here for about 30 years, and there had never been any incidents here. I received a phone call because there had just been an arson attempt. A Molotov cocktail, a bottle of Coca-Cola filled with flammable liquid, was propped against the train's door and set on fire. And there was a handwritten note. On it was a swastika and the words Bin Laden and the extreme right for the liberation of Palestine.
Now you see in the suburbs extreme right movements going in the suburbs to fight Jews with the help of Islamist movements. In England, David Mamet, who was one of the main Nazi leaders, is someone who means a lot of things for all the Nazis of the world. And he converted to Islam last year. He was accepted at the Finsbury Mosque in London, received by Omar Bakri Muhammad, and they were very proud to receive in their movement, pro-Al-Qaeda movement, one of the main Nazi leaders of the world. The big movement for Nazi students in France, the name is GUD. The GUD before was accused to be racist and anti-immigrated and Islamophobic. Now they see in Bin Laden not an enemy, but an allied. Bin Laden is a good guy because he destroyed the center of Judaism and capitalism of the world. All the big demonstration against the war in Iraq and against Sharon, those 4 years, you could see in the street the extreme left, Nazis, radical communists, and Islamists with the flag of the Hezbollah and of the Hamas.
Hundreds of people, thousands of people demonstrated in Paris against the war in Iraq. These people called themselves pacifists, but they were screaming Zionism equals racism. They were yelling Bush equals Nazi, Sharon equals Nazi. When they saw in the crowd some teenagers and one was wearing a yarmulke, a group of 40 people beat them up. When they saw French Jewish youngsters, they beat them up.
There were people in the street shouting, "Dead to the Jews." I was shocked during this demonstration because it was maybe one of the first big events where the new anti-Semitism of the left appeared publicly. It was a meeting after a very long road of the extreme left and the anti-Semitism.
The worst mistake we can make is to always only look over our right shoulder and say, we're looking for a man with a little mustache who does Heil Hitler salutes. The new cover for anti-Semitism is the singling out of Israel for special and undeserved criticism, the singling out of Zionism among every other national movement.
Anti-Semitism is still the disease of the right, and that should never be forgotten. What has now happened is that in sections of the left, anti-Zionism, anti-Israel feeling is so strong that it is often tinged with anti-Semitism.
There's no doubt that the statements made by the Nobel Prize winner in literature were anti-Semitic, basically saying that there's a Holocaust, where are the gas chambers, they're not here yet. That kind of thing. Pollan is not a great poet, but nonetheless, he's a famous poet. A terrible cycle ensues. Pollan gets invited to come to a place like Harvard, and then there's criticism, and so he's disinvited, and suddenly he's the victim of censorship. He becomes the good guy when he is the awful bad guy.
When Pascal Boniface, who is one of the most famous geopoliticians in France, explains you that the only danger for the world and for the peace is not North Korea or China or Iran or Pakistan or Saudi Arabia, but the little state of Israel. In this case, we can surely, without being unfair, we can surely think that we are in face of someone who is anti-Semite, but he doesn't want to explain and to claim it because he belongs to a left party. And in a left party like the Socialist Party, it's not fashion to be anti-Semite openly. José Bové, for him, anti-Semitism is an invention of Mossad. I think it's very dangerous when someone very popular who fights in the name of Greens, of the farmers, the real France, the food, when he's becoming like the Islamists or like the Nazis.
Monsieur Fogiel, oui? Ne coupez pas la parole, s'il vous plaît.
With Dieudonné, it becomes something normal in the spectacles, in the TV, in the shows. In one of the most famous shows in France, he imitated an Israeli soldier making the jest of a Nazi. The anti-Semitism is becoming part of anti-racism and politically correctness. We must speak about José Bové, Dieudonné in this context. If you are against the Jews who support Sharon or who support Israel, it's not racism, it's anti-racism.
Recently, I was appointed by President Bush to be a member of the American delegation at a 55-nation conference sponsored by the OSCE, a conference on anti-Semitism and other forms of intolerance. The European countries, specifically Belgium, the Netherlands, and even Canada, came forward and said that they were considering taking the anti-Semitism out for special recognition at future conferences because it's not equal. At a time when anti-Semitism is rampant all over Europe, European countries, under the guise of equality, saying because it's not fair to Christians and Muslims that we should have anti-Semitism up there alone. And I turned to the Belgian minister at the meeting, and I said, Mr. Minister, with the greatest of respect, where is the equality in the General Assembly of the United Nations? If Europe was interested in equality, why doesn't Belgium and the Netherlands and Canada stand up in the United Nations General Assembly and say, why are all the resolutions always against Israel? There are no resolutions against women's rights in the Arab world, about Iran, about North Korea, about what is happening with Islamic fundamentalism and suicide bombings. No resolutions. Only a resolution to condemn Israel. Where is the equality then that you're so concerned about now?
Israel is the Jew among nations. Clearly, by every standard that used to describe individual anti-Semitism, the focus of attention, the unfair criticism directed against everything Israel does and everything Israel is, qualifies it as the Jew among nations. It is treated as the Jew by the United Nations. It is treated as the Jew by the European community. When the French ambassador to Great Britain talks about Israel as the problem of the world, he's talking about the Jews. There's no way around that. It is simply extending classic individual anti-Semitism, which always applied to the Jewish people, to the Jewish state.
I see a lot of people posing as strong international advocates, acting as if the world revolved around Palestine and Israel, who are quiet on the issues of Darfur, Africa, or Chechnya. But as soon as something happens in Israel or Palestine, they crank it up a notch. The only thing that makes the conflict in the Middle East different from all other conflicts is because it involves the Jews. Therefore, anti-Zionism, as professed by some people, definitely is a cover-up for the most classic form of anti-Semitism. As Martin Luther King put it, anti-Zionism is essentially anti-Semitism in nature.
Divestiture and boycotts are more dangerous for the message they send to young people on college campuses than for the actual pragmatic effect they may have on individual teachers and individual institutions, although it's serious. When you get deans and heads of houses and prominent professors signing petitions singling out only Israel for this form of academic capital punishment or economic capital punishment, it sends a message to young kids right out of high school that there is a pariah in the world. Young people believe it. If you look at the poll in Europe, what country is the greatest danger to world peace? Israel. I mean, my God, what kind of miseducation. It's not so different from if you had asked German students in the 1930s. What group of people poses the greatest danger in the world? They say the Jews.
I think it is absolutely wrong to suggest that criticism of Israel is necessarily anti-Semitic, But I do think it's right to question the intensity of criticism, the one-sided way in which Israel is blamed for all the problems of the very complex Israeli-Palestinian issues, and the way in which people seem to single out Israel above all other countries in the world for action.
I hereby repeat an offer I have made many times. $1,000 to anybody who can find any prominent Jewish leader who has ever equated criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. It is a myth. It hasn't happened. Criticism of Israel is welcomed. Why? Because most Israelis are critics of Israel. Most American Jews are critics of Israel.
Everybody says if you are anti-Zionist, then you're anti-Semitic. And we don't believe that. We believe Zionism, from our perspective, Zionism is a colonial and racist ideology. You have many Jews who are anti-Zionists. I can give you names of organizations like Jews Against Zionists, Naturai Karta, very religious Jewish organization, anti-Zionist, clearly anti-Zionist. So anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism.
Much of what today goes around as anti-Zionism is really anti-Semitism. And some of the worst offenders are Jews. A man named Norman Finkelstein has just written a whole phony book claiming that people say that criticism of Israel constitutes anti-Semitism. It is a canard. Reminds me of the Jordanian ambassador defending the Zionism equals racism resolution at the UN, saying, hey, it can't be anti-Semitic. Ha ha, I'm a Semite. How can I be anti-Semitic if I'm a Semite? Noam Chomsky, it can't be anti-Semitic. I'm a Jew. Norman Finkelstein, it can't be anti-Semitic. My parents are Holocaust survivors. It is such an abuse of one's heritage, such an abuse of one's history, such an abuse of the tragedy of the Holocaust, to use it in this way, to gain legitimacy for anti-Semitism, that the Jewish community clearly has to confront it.
The future is in the hands of God, just like the past and the present, like everything. Like Islam, with the coming of the Prophet Muhammad, there were wars, but in fact, like all wars, the armies that marched, they were cheered by the people. They were happy. They were liberated from the tyrants.
Since the attacks of July 7, 2005, the question many people have been asking is, to what extent have the extremists taken over Islam? The resurgence of anti-Semitism in Europe has been largely fueled by the Islamists or groups influenced by them. Large numbers of European Jews expressed doubts about their future on the European continent.
When I walk in the street with my yarmulke, with my kippah, and my 4 or 5-year-old boy, my son, we stop at a traffic light, car stops, open the windows, and start calling us, "You dirty Jews, Jews." So what do I explain to my 4-year-old son? What do I say to him?
I don't feel so much comfortable as I used to be 10, 15 years ago. 10, 15 years ago, I wasn't even thinking that the future of my children would be a little bit problematic. Now I'm starting thinking, did I give them a good advice to say there's a future for your children and for your grandchildren, etc.
La lutte contre l'antisémitisme.
The war against anti-Semitism is not a matter to be handled by Jews alone, but by the national community as a whole. I think that for Jews to stop being fearful, we must not try to be too intellectual with anti-Semites. We must fight them, we must punish them, and impose heavy sanctions.
In France, England, Holland, and Germany, authorities have started cracking down on Islamic extremists. Citizens have been arrested for violating laws against inciting racial or religious hatred. Others who have violated the terms of their legal residency have been deported. But will these steps make a difference?
The Pentagon is a target for the Muslims, and we will always target
We'll always target any government building, any legislation.
Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah. I'm going to keep this short and to the point. Our words are dead until we give them life with our blood. I and thousands like me have forsaken everything for what we believe. Until we feel security, you will be our targets. We will not stop this fight. We are at war and I'm a soldier. Now you too will taste the reality of this situation.
There is no relationship between occupation, oppression, and suicide bombing or hate. If there were, the Tibetans would be the greatest suicide bombers in the world today, and the Cubans would be engaged in all kinds of suicide bombings. We don't see that. It's cultural, it's elitist, it comes from the top.
These young people are feeling frustrated, they're feeling angry, and they don't have hope. What we need to do is to persuade them that things can change through political engagement, through democracy, and that's what we haven't done.
But is the average Muslim on the European street open to this message of moderation?
A lot of people like me receive threats when we speak. There are people in the room who attack us. People who think like me generally do not speak up because of fear. They're scared to take a stand because they're scared of threats and insults.
It's worth pointing out that most Muslims think that, in fact, violent extremists are outside Islam.
Whether you like it or not, Islam is going to be victorious. Whether you like it or not, Islam is going to take over UK.
What I'm arguing is that that kind of extremism is, in fact, part of the Islamic history, and we need to acknowledge that.
The Jewish community and all decent people have to begin to cultivate moderate Muslim imams, moderate Muslim intellectuals, and moderate Muslim lay people, just to speak out. The vast majority of Muslims in the world today are good and decent people, and it's crucially important that the good and decent moderates among Muslims who condemn anti-Semitism, who condemn terrorism, many of whom condemn even anti-Israel rhetoric. I've met many such people who see peace as requiring an elimination of the hatred, must be encouraged.
وهذه العمليات الله سبحانه وتعالى عوض بها الفلسطينيين عن القوة التي فقدوها. ليس عندهم ما عند الصهاينة من الأباتشي ولا المقاتلات ولا الدبابات ولا الصواريخ. عوضهم الله بهذه القنابل البشرية. هذا من العدالة الإلهية.
My name is Daniel Pearl. I'm a Jewish American. I come from, on my father's side, a family of Zionists. My father's Jewish. My mother's Jewish. I'm Jewish.
We are dealing here with people like Qaradawi. He represents, I believe, the sentiments of most clerics in the Middle East. On November 2001, he was interviewed by my son. And he made this very clear statement that Israel doesn't have civilians. Every woman and person in Israel is essentially a soldier. Every boy will grow to be a soldier. So Israel is void of civilians. It's a country of soldiers. And therefore, they are all legitimate targets. The truth is that the jihad interpretation is dominant in the schools today. There's no question about it. And the fact that Al Jazeera gives voice every week, it gives 2 hours to Yusuf Qaradawi, and I have to repeat his name again and again because I think he's a pivot line. Okay? He is the litmus test of where Islam is going. And they have a choice now to put their moral principles before their political agenda or not. There are some principles of civilized society that you don't cross. There are red lines. They have to make it a religious red line, which you haven't done yet. If we can force them, explain to them, educate them, encourage them to make it a religiously fortified red line, then I think we have a chance of winning their heart. Well, I'm angry. There's no question about I'm angry, but I'm also an engineer, which means I must be effective. Okay? If I go to Pakistan and I throw a stone at the murderer,
or even if I kill him, it wouldn't do any good. There will be other victims like Danny. I'm after the ideology that brought about this hate and brought about this mentality.
اليهود لن يعيشوا في ظل حكمنا هانئين مستقرين لأنه في طبيعتهم الغدر سيكون على مدار التاريخ. سيأتي يوم يرتاح من اليهود كل شيء حتى الحجر والشجر الذي تأذى منهم. اسمعوا حبيبكم صلى الله عليه وسلم وهو يحدثكم عن أسوأ نهاية لليهود. الحجر والشجر يريد أن ينهي المسلم على كل يهودي.
The 3rd of September, the last transfer to Auschwitz, we went to Auschwitz. So we went into a cattle wagon, but it lasted 3 days. We, my friend and I, went to the other barrack, and there we saw Anne and Margot again. My mother found a way and gave us something to eat. And my friend, she divided it between Anne, Margot, me, and herself. And then at a certain day, they had to leave, and I had to stay there. So my friend, Anne and Margot, they all went away. It's coming back, and it's fact, a terrible fact. Everybody, wherever it is, must talk to people, with organizations, and to tell everybody not to be indifferent. I do what I can in that respect, because otherwise I couldn't live with myself.
I come here to the memorial very often and give testimony. When I speak about my house and my school, I am very sad. You know, I'm getting old. What can I say? I sleep very little at night. I'm sick to see all this. I say it in meetings, to see that 60 years after the Shoah, the Holocaust, to see what happens today with anti-Semitism.
I remember the story that Rabbi Matisyahu Solomon told about his father, who was active in helping Jewish refugees in England during the war. One day, his father, right after the Second World War, came home and said, I'm bringing a young boy that's going to stay with us, and I want you to give him all the cookies in the cookie jar. And young Matisyahu asked his father, why does he deserve to get all the cookies in the jar? And his father said, this young boy was with his father in Auschwitz-Birkenau. And there, amidst the destruction and the starvation, all the father can do, he knew that he was doomed. All he could do about protecting the legacy of the family was that he taught his son by heart, because there were no books, one page of the Talmud every day that they were in Birkenau. Soon, it was the father's turn to be gassed, and the boy miraculously survived. And all he had in life was those 200 pages his father had given over to him. Now, what was in those 200 pages? It was a model for his future life, that he should try to repair the world and not to destroy it, that he should try to dignify the world and not to demean it. And this young man, that is what to him religion meant and taught him. Not to go out on trains and buses and kill people, or to spread hate in other ways, but to figure out a way in which to bring human dignity and tolerance and respect for others into the world. That is a true religious person.